The Valley Current.
Hey, Marc. All right. Well, it's been a long time, man. I have to say, I remember some moments in Trieste when both of us were much younger. I want to say it must be at least 25 years ago.
That's about right.
I mean, you were there with Lisa, but I'm not sure you were married yet.
No, well, I'm trying to remember if it was '07, I was with Lisa.
In Trieste?
And yeah, but you didn't come to see me when I was in Trieste 10 years before that.
I don't think so, but I want to tell you a funny story for a minute. So I'm in a restaurant with this guy who's the grandson of one of the people that was in Telecom Italia.
Right.
And he remembers his grandfather talking about trying to get Wi-Fi into the stadium or trying to get internet into the stadium. And I said, I know the guy who actually was behind that effort.
Yeah.
And he said, I just know that my grandfather wanted to see so many things happen at Telecom Italia because I think they were a partner in that big deal.
Absolutely. And they took me to Rome. And we sat there and talked about the topology, how to wire it up.
Right.
And there are these Alcatel switches because Alcatel had a factory outside of Trieste. So they wanted to use Alcatel equipment. And we had gone through the manual. And it was one of these ADSL systems. If you remember ADSL?
Right.
And so you could configure it. And in one setting, it was 500 users. And in the other setting, it was 5,000 users. So we brought them to page 822, showed them the dip switch settings. Like, this is exactly how you configure the switch to do 500, because then it could get 5 megabits of bandwidth, right? And they said, and then we're going to do 64 of these switches. And they said, no, signore, you can't do that. And we said, why not? Let me show you on page 824. Right here, it says dip switch settings, 5 megabits, but it's only 500 users.
Yeah.
So they kept insisting they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And we're in this room with a 2-story glass wall.
Right.
It's the Roman summer. There's a thunderstorm outside. And you might as well had Kirk Douglas and Spartacus nailed up on the cross. It was like right out of the movie, right?
Right.
So we finally said, dude, why can't we do it? It's obvious you just daisy chain them together. And they said, Signore, nobody has ever done this before.
That's what you're best at.
Right? We can't do that. We've never done it before.
Yeah. Silicon Valley versus Italy. There it is.
Man,
summed up.
Man.
So Marc, tell me, Marc, you come from some interesting DNA. And I think there is in your DNA this desire to constantly be in restart mode, but that's a separate topic we should talk about.
Being a rebel and, on the outside looking in.
But you were born in New York, I think, or Boston. Tell me the story.
No, I was born a half a mile from Soldier Field in Chicago.
In Chicago, okay.
And when I was pulled out, the first words I heard were, I want tickets to the Bears game when this guy is playing for the Bears. So I was always a big baby and a targeted football player. The problem was the school I went to was 99% black.
Okay.
So I could never play football because I'd be this white light bulb target.
So this must be the west side of Chicago, or what part of Chicago?
South side.
South side, okay. So this is
the baddest
like
part of town.
The baddest part of town, right? That's the song, right?
Yeah.
And so your parents grew up, it sounds like, in poverty or close to poverty, or what was the story with them?
No, no, no. And first of all, let me just say that on the south side of Chicago, my guitar teacher played for Muddy Waters,
Wow,
famous blues guy. So
that's
at
big.
age 15, I was already losing my hair. I was able to go to the Checkerboard Lounge and
Hmm.
hear my guitar player play with Muddy Waters, my guitar
Wow,
teacher.
that's
Okay, so
huge.
both my parents are from Boston.
Boston. I
Okay.
thought Boston was in the picture. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, my grandfather was a famous American communist who fought with the Sacco and Vanzetti case.
Right. That's a
Do you
big
remember
case,
that?
really important
Two
case. Yeah.
Italian anarchists were
Right.
framed on a murder charge, and my
Right.
grandfather carried a sign the day after the execution saying that the governor was a murderer.
Right.
So they arrested my grandfather and charged him with libel, and
Oh,
he
brother.
served a year in prison.
Oh, Jesus. Oh,
Now,
Jesus.
he then, when they came out a year later, he picked up the family and moved to Moscow.
Russia. Okay.
Yeah, so my father was raised from age 7 to 15 in Moscow.
Wow.
In 1935, my grandfather came back to the States to renew his passport.
Right.
And there they put on a rally in Union Square, which used
Right.
to be the downtown of New York.
True.
And the Daily Herald, which was the Daily Worker, which was a daily communist newspaper,
Right.
had read the headline, Canter returns from Russia.
Wow.
And so there's 15,000 people at this rally in Union Square for my grandfather.
Hmm.
And when he came back, they officially expunged the records because it turned out that the governor was a murderer. And all the truth had come out, and they had lied and framed these two Italians. And anyway, so that was our upbringing. My father had connects to Russia and brought over the USSR photography exhibit as it was
Okay.
touring around the US. So we had USSR photographers come visit us. He was an activist during the 60s. So he was one of the organizers of the Chicago Democratic Convention. Um,
Was
so,
he
and
was
then
he was he was he actually in the newspaper business, or was he actually
my grandfather was in the newspaper business. He worked for the Sun Times. He
right?
was the head proofreader.
Hmm.
He also, when he went to Russia, managed the project that translated Marx and Engels from
Right.
German into Russian.
Wow.
And they published like a 13-volume set. So he was a book publisher and editor. Then
Right.
he worked at the Sun Times. My father made Spiegel catalogs as a job and went and got his Juris Doctor degree. He was a lawyer.
Wow.
And throughout the 60s, we were going to Martin Luther King marches, fighting against the Vietnam War. And this eventually led to my father convincing a guy named Harold Washington to run for mayor of Chicago when Jane Byrne closed down the L to the south
Hmm.
side during a
Right.
snowstorm. So there was another white guy running against Jane Byrne. They split the white vote. And then my father was his campaign manager and ran the first, and Harold Washington became the first black mayor of Chicago. And that was in 83. So my father was a politician. And I took the idealism of my father and grandfather and applied it to the software business.
Well, that's an amazing insight that you have, that you took idealism and you brought it into kind of the 21st
Oh,
century.
man. Dude, I can tell you that the world's first developers program was Microsoft. I was there. The
Hmm.
second developers program was Apple. I was
Right.
there. And
Right.
my wife at the time, her name was Devora, she and
Hmm.
I invented the Macromind Developers Conference, which was the third developers conference ever. And then this would date it like 86, 87. So I
Right.
always saw things from the developer's point of view, from the user's point of view, and I've never worked for a large tech company. Similar to you, Jack, I don't know how many of your listeners
Right.
know that you refuse to ever work for any of the big tech.
Right. Right. I mean, that's an important point. We kind of align ourselves with the entrepreneur. We don't align ourselves with kind of the silos or the foundries or whatever you want to call them.
Nowadays, these people just elected Trump. I mean, these
Right.
crypto bros paid for the election, and they don't
Right.
give a damn about what's happening to our civil liberties and democracy.
Yeah.
They're out just eating like pigs in a trough, man.
They're buying islands, man. They're buying islands to be on their own. It's like Larry Ellison buying half of Hawaii or
Zuckerberg has an underground compound in Kauai, you know.
Right. Hey, so let me understand this. I didn't know that your first wife was actually that technical and actually involved in the business. I always thought the idea, for what I remember as video works, I remember when you first came to my office, you said, I've invented a new category. I can almost paraphrase it. You said, look, I invented a new category. I'm calling it Video Works. Maybe we have to rebrand it. I've got it right here. It's on a little Mac disk. I can show it to you on your Mac. It's basically something I'm calling animation. I think it's going to be big. And I remember thinking at the time, is this real or is this guy just like blowing a lot of smoke? But you were very real.
Yeah.
You did the demo. And you said,
I was going to SIGGRAPH. They just had SIGGRAPH last week. So I was attending this conference called SIGGRAPH. And
it's a big conference,
on computer graphics. And that was the state of the art. And this is where, all the high-end computer graphics came from. And what I always thought was, we got to make this accessible to everybody on a PC.
Right.
And so it was when the Macintosh came out, it was the first machine that had enough power, it had the GUI, and it had enough RAM and standard graphics, standard audio, and that was enough for us. And so the Macintosh was going to be our authoring platform, and it would spit out video games for the Apple II, the Commodore 64, and the Atari 800. That was the target market. We were going to author video games.
It's a big idea, because what most people don't realize is when Apple was formed back in the 70s, it started, and I've said this on other podcasts, it started as a general partnership of Jobs with Wozniak, and there was a third guy who was supposed to be their financial guy and find the money, but he never did. General partnerships are absolutely the worst way of doing business. And this guy should have known better. This guy was supposedly the senior talent, the senior kind of C-suite talent. He didn't really have his act together. They got rid of him. They eventually came to what was then Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick. I was there as a very, very young lawyer. There was a senior partner there by the name of Tim Todd. I was like lawyer number 11 or 12. Tim Todd was a partner who had come from the East Coast, from Boston originally, and he was very straight-laced. And basically, he saw Jobs and Wozniak because Jobs had a girlfriend, or one of his girlfriends was basically the sister of one of the secretaries. And the secretary said, "Hey, see my younger sister's guy. He's going to start a company. He's got an idea. I don't know if it's worth anything, but he's willing to come in." They assigned it to the wrong lawyer. They assigned it to this guy who was very stuffy. Tim Todd was very stuffy, straight-laced, bow tie, suspenders. I think I've told you the story. They came in and they said, look, we don't have any money, so we have to pay you with stock, but we understand that people can pay with stock. Like, we'll give you like 5% of the company. And Tim Todd just about exploded because he said, first of all, they didn't show up getting dressed up. In those days, you used to put a suit and tie on before you saw your priest, your rabbi, or your lawyer. It's like you're going to the high priest, right? So people said, sorry, Tim, that's just strike one. What's strike two? Well, strike two is they didn't even bathe. They smelled really bad, and their shirt was up under their arms, and it smelled like they were smoking weed or something. And, that's illegal in California. This is back in the 70s. That's illegal in California. What was strike three, Tim? All right, that maybe they were just working hard. We can forgive them for that, can't we? He said, no, I can't forgive them for that. I can't forgive them for anything. They had a stupid fucking name for the company. They wanted to call it Apple. I had to convince them that that's a stupid name and that we went with Apple Computer Inc. Before Jobs died, he actually held a shareholders meeting to change the name back to Apple, his original idea. It's such a great story because, these guys, they lucked out in so many different ways. And one of them was, they did actually have instincts for how to market their product.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
They had some good instincts, right?
Absolutely. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm pretty good friends with the guy named Daniel Kotke.
Yeah,
you know that name?
A good guy. I know Daniel. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Daniel.
and he's the one who got screwed. And in all the different Steve Jobs movies, the one with Ashton Kutcher, and they always feature the story of how Steve screwed Daniel.
Right. And Dan's been pretty good about not making it widely publicized, right?
Yes,
he's pretty good about it.
It turned out that one of the other guys slipped him some stock. It wasn't just Daniel. All the early people got screwed.
Right.
And I seem to remember it was something like $20 million of stock that the guy slipped out the back door to make sure to take care of the early employees. Now, I met Daniel because he owned the former mayor of Palo Alto's house. On the Embarcadero. And he used to throw these parties that would start on Friday night and go till Sunday.
Wow.
And I was so in awe of him. I would come from Chicago. I would go to these parties and just have the greatest time hanging out. And he became this, the vision of California partier, So then I started throwing parties up on Potrero Hill and I would model them after him.
Well,
and then Daniel had a kid that was my son's age, so he would bring his son to my party, and they would hang out. All our three sons, the boys would all hang out together.
You're always very advanced. I like to think that you're always kind of outside the emerging Overton window. There's this guy named Overton who said all of what gets put in the newspapers has to fit within some existing structure for what represents the window of acceptability. And that's called the Overton window. So you were way ahead on the Overton window for marijuana. You were way, way ahead. I remember when you lit up in a deposition and everyone looked at you like, what are you doing? You said, I'm having a cigarette. He said, that's not a cigarette, because back then you could smoke during a deposition. People don't remember that you could smoke during depositions. The lawyers used to smoke during depositions. It was like a salon in a way. A deposition was like a salon. Yeah. And you lit up a big fat doobie, and everyone was looking at you like, what are you doing? And you said, I'm going to answer your questions under oath. I'm going to have a cigarette along the way. And they said, well, that's not a cigarette. You said, yeah, it doesn't have all the toxics that you guys are smoking. It doesn't have all the nicotine.
Have you ever heard of a Rasta who died of lung cancer?
Yeah.
It doesn't have any of the bad stuff in it.
Right. So you were always way ahead on the Overton window, and you were way ahead on conceiving animation. And I want to know a little bit more about how that happened, because, of course, we know Rick Rubin, and we love Rick Rubin's work, and he talks about how sort of intangible an idea is and how it just comes. It just arrives. It's like it can't be planned. It's got to arrive. It's like us doing this podcast. We just got together for 5 minutes.
Magic, dude. It's magic. I do it. So my other co-founder of Macromind, he was my best man at my wedding, Marc Pierce, and he and I always had this clear vision that there would be this thing called an authoring system that would spit out animations and this and that, and then we would tie in interactivity and music and sound effects, and it was all really clear to us, and we never even needed to discuss it. The moment I got married, we got some money from my father-in-law, and we bought 3 Lisas because Guy Kawasaki told us to do that. So we
Right.
spent half our money on Lisas, and we
They were
just
like
immediately.
they're like 6,000 a pop, which was a
Oh
lot of
no!
money
It
back
was
then,
like
right?
no. It was when you got all the RAM. It
Yeah.
was 15,000.
Wow.
I
Okay, so
spent
people.
$45,000 on 3 Lisas.
Okay, so people won't know that there was actually a device after the first Mac that was like twice the size of the first Mac called a Lisa.
No. It was before the Mac.
Before
It
the
was
Mac?
before the
I don't
Mac.
remember
Yes,
that. I don't remember that.
completely separate team. It
Okay.
was because remember they were taking the Xerox PARC Alto, and it
Right.
was almost
Right.
a direct copy of the Alto. And
Right.
then Jobs was involved in it, and in fact, they played this out in the Ashton Kutcher movie where he
Right.
was kicked off the Lisa team, and then he found Burl Smith and Bill Atkinson, and they said,
Right.
"Well, let's do the Lisa for the consumer because the Lisa was designed as an enterprise machine."
Right.
So they said, let's do it more like an appliance, like cheap and
Right.
small.
Right.
And
Right.
so the Mac, they went off on their own. They waved strung up a pirate flag, and they
Right.
went completely rogue as a separate team. The Lisa
Right.
comes out, it bombs immediately.
Right.
You're right, it was like 6,000 for nothing, but you had
Right.
to put RAM into it,
Yeah.
other
Too
things.
too pricey. Too pricey.
Right.
It was actually too big too. It was a big machine.
Yeah.
It was big.
Now,
It
what we
wasn't
found
easy.
was, see, the Macintosh was so revolutionary. What we found was that they had a thing called the resource manager. And I
Mhm.
was the musician, and Mark Pierce was the artist. And
Okay.
Jamie Fenton was the programmer. So he
Right.
needed this Lisa, but we
Right.
didn't need the Lisas. So we just got our Macintoshes, and those we created our music resources and our graphics resources. And then you carried the floppy disk over to the Lisa, and you just attach them via what was called the resource manager. So the 2 Lisas sat as door stops. We never used them.
Wow.
And,
I didn't know that.
Well, and this is just the first of many stories of how Guy Kawasaki led us on, lied to us, was bullshitting. I mean, it was just unbelievable how many.
Well, Guy Kawasaki was evangelizing equipment, trying to get it sold.
Yeah.
Basically, he was a salesman, but he was a salesman to the developer community, right?
Yes, and for whatever reason, he never liked us. We were the guys from Chicago. Anyway, I don't worry about the negativity.
But he loved Dave and Peter Weiner. He loved them. I can
Yes,
tell
he
you that
did, and he
for a fact.
bought a bunch of copies of More.
Oh man!
It really helped out.
You needed to be treated the way he treated LVT, Living
So
Video.
we are exactly mistreated over and over again.
I don't get that. I don't get that, Mark. I don't, because you had the more revolution. I mean, look, Dave and Peter did some great stuff, and I respect them. But you had the more innovative product.
First of all, Jean-Louis Gasset also really liked Dave. So Dave and Guy Kawasaki and Jean-Louis helped out Dave. They bought like 20,000 copies of More.
Right.
And remember, Dave was publishing himself. Now, we were publishing through Broderbund.
Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe that was a mistake.
Well, I mean, but this is all I had. I was in Chicago. I had nothing. I had no money. Anyway, so they helped us out. They got us into the channel.
Right.
But it wasn't until the color Macintosh came out. And guess who was an enemy of the color Macintosh? Fucking Guy Kawasaki and Jean-Louis Gasset.
Really?
They never liked it. So we were the first company with color Macintosh software.
Right.
And that was VideoWorks 2.
Right.
And that's when this guy named Miles Gilburn.
Wait, don't go to Miles. Don't go to Miles yet. Don't go to Miles yet, because I want to backtrack a second. So first of all, when you talked about Xerox PARC, you were spot on, because I can tell you that I know for a fact that Doug Engelbart is actually the inventor of both the mouse and the graphical user interface at Xerox PARC. I know him personally. I've given money to his foundation. He's now deceased, unfortunately. He's he was a great guy. He got 0 for that invention. Zero, nothing.
Yes, I know. That means that My Mei Lin Feng.
Yeah.
Do you remember her? So I
Yeah.
know her because when I came back from Cleveland,
Right.
she found out that I had an economic development model,
Okay.
and she and Vint Cerf pitched me to revitalize my digital city project in Solano County. So for
That's
four
played
months,
out.
I'm working with Mei
That's played
Lin.
out. That's played out
It,
now, Mark. That's played out there.
I, dude, okay, I'm just going to say this really quickly. Two original Google X executives, Courtney, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. They
Yeah.
left Google X. They have a
Right.
new startup called Unown. And
Yeah.
they put out a post that says, we're looking to fund moonshots and all these wacky projects that no one else will fund. So I immediately contacted her. I got exactly the right project. So I was
Right.
started to revitalize my digital city project. I've ascertained it's 15 years ahead of its time.
At least. At
And it
least.
is the descendant of the Trieste project,
Right.
right? So it's
Right.
the same DNA. So
Right.
this for about 3 weeks, it was on the front burner. And then she admitted to me, well, Mark, first we have to fund our own company. So
Oh,
you're on the
brother.
list. Within a year, we'll get to you.
Oh, brother.
So this
But
is my
listen, but
life,
listen,
Jack.
Mark, I have to make an observation because
Yeah.
we were lucky enough at Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick that then became Fenwick and West. Fenwick
Yeah.
is now deceased. West is now deceased. It was at one point Fenwick, Stone, Davis, and West. Stone is deceased. Davis, I think, is still alive. Stafford died because the original name was Davis Stafford. Stafford recently died. But the point that I'm making is we represented also, we're like idiots. We didn't take stock in Apple, but we did
Yeah.
eventually get religion. And I think we took stock in electronic arts. We started electronic arts. We started Oracle computers.
I'm pretty sure that Fenwick and West got Macromedia stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So let me tell you something.
Yeah.
You actually invented something that could have become electronic arts because your original idea was to get the artist to pump out video games. That's
Yeah.
exactly what electronic arts did when it built its platform. It built a platform that said, this is the artist platform. We're going to recruit artists, and then we're going to publish their games. What you
Okay, so
didn't have was
I've got a
publication
related
model.
story here.
Right.
Right as I was getting married, before
Right.
Macromine was formed.
Deborah.
Okay,
Sorry,
not
Deidre.
Devorah,
I call it Deidre.
Okay, so I have a college friend whose father was the number 3 at the William Morris Agency.
Right. Doesn't get better than that. Doesn't get better than that.
So I'm at his birthday party in New York City because I'm getting engaged, and I brought my young fiance to New York to meet all my friends.
Right.
So we're at this party, and they had just produced a TV show called The Whiz Kids, and it was horrible.
Okay.
So I'm at the party, and this guy comes up to me and says, I understand you like computers. And I said, yeah, I'm a computer guy. He says, so what do you think about my show, The Whiz Kids?
Oh,
and
brother.
I said, dude, that show sucks. You have no idea what you're talking about. That is not what a computer is.
Are you talking to your father or your first father? Oh, are you referring to?
No. Well, yes, my first father-in-law also had a Yiddish accent, but I'm here to. Yeah. Okay. So the guy says to me, "Would you like to take one of our agents to California and introduce them to computer book authors?"
Okay.
This is January '84.
Right.
I go and introduce them to John Markoff, John Dvorak, Scott Mace. Okay, all my people became my friends, right?
All the notables that you know.
Because there were 7-figure advances being paid for books
back in those days. In those days, absolutely.
So we ended up going to the launch of this new computer called the Macintosh.
Right.
Down at the college campus, right from Apple.
Right.
So I come back from this thing and I get married. I'm holding a Macintosh brochure in my hand in the wedding photos. Okay.
Mm,
And then the William Morris agency asks me, would I like to be an agent? And
wow.
I said, no, I'd rather be a client. So we became represented by the William Morris Agency, which is how we got our deal with Hayden Software. We had Hayden competing with CBS Software. And
Right.
then later on, Bill Gates asked me, how come you never brought your product to us? And I said, Bill,
Mark, there's so many sliding doors in your story where you're getting
yeah.
on one train and you should be
Oh,
getting on
yeah.
another.
Well, the dude was called Alan Brody. I knew
Right,
exactly who to blame. Well,
right,
Alan Brody wasn't interested. And I can remember this standing in the doorway with Bill Gates telling him this story,
right,
Later on, he and I were on stage together when
right,
Microsoft was licensing our player to be the .mmm player for this new thing called Windows.
right,
And we had
right.
a license to license our platform. John Doerr personally got involved to make sure that we got the contract.
Let me
So
tell you
everything's
something, Mark.
going,
So let me tell you something. Let me interject here because this is something you don't
yeah,
know. You may recall that there was a product called VisiCalc,
of course.
VIS cap
CALs, yeah.
Visible Calculator, shortened to VisiCalc. Great name, great trademark. We represented the original company that published that software called Personal Software Inc., later changed its name to VisiCorp before it tried
Yep.
to go public. Let me tell you something. Without VisiCalc, the original Apple II would have failed. The
Yep.
main software on the Apple II was this spreadsheet called VisiCalc that predates
Yep.
123, predates Excel,
Yep.
predates them all. Dan Foster, who's still alive and still is in the software business, was the CEO and founder of Personal Software Inc. But the actual software was developed by two guys on the East Coast, Dan Brickman and his partner.
Yeah.
Software Arts was the developer. They were essentially hidden because VisiCorp kind of sucked up all the oxygen in the room. Everyone
Yep.
thought that VisiCalc was a VisiCorp product. It was actually originated by Dan Bricklin and Franklin. This guy's name is Franklin. Franklin Bricklin. Bricklin and Franklin. You'll look him up. His first name is Franklin. I forget his last name is Franklin. But Franklin and Bricklin were like
Bob Frankston.
It's a great joint venture. It was not structured as a joint venture. It was not structured as a partnership. It was structured as a publishing relationship.
Right.
The publisher was VisiCorp.
And they get like 15% or something, right?
Yeah, I forget what the split was, but they used a book publishing contract out of a form book instead of going to lawyer because they couldn't afford a lawyer. Litigated over that
I went through that whole cycle.
It's
and
amazing.
I ended up, and so then I had to take more money from my father-in-law to become a publisher so that we didn't need Broderbund.
Right.
And that's when Miles showed up. And then then I won some awards at the SPA, the Software Publishers Association.
Right.
And that's when Miles noticed me, and the rest is history.
Well, Gilbern had a law firm called Blank Gilbern. Blank was a good trial lawyer. Gilbern was like a schmoozer. I don't know if he's still alive. I mean, I think he did pretty well financially. Yeah. And, there were a bunch of people that did really well financially, but they never had your creative brilliance, that's for sure. Yeah. I mean, in terms of
they had a guy named David Tate, and he was the CEO of Ashton Tate.
Ashton Tate, right.
Yeah.
But conceptually, I think your story is very similar to Doug Engelbart's. You invent some great things, and then other people take credit for them.
Yeah.
People take
and that's
credit
why,
for them.
in fact, and that's why Maylin liked me. She said that all the time. Oh, you're just like Doug,
Right.
And then I would say, and then we were looking for money, and I said, well, how come Vint can't just write a check? Why don't we get Google to pay for this? Well, Vint doesn't have any budget. We got to go blah, blah, blah. And so for 4 months, I'm listening to the blah, blah, blah. And that's when I decided I needed to get into AI. So that
Right.
was 2016. And I met my partner, Steve DiPaolo, who you met.
Right.
And Steve just came from SIGGRAPH. He's still one of the leading embedded AI researchers. He hasn't sold out. He hasn't gone to work for Meta or anybody or OpenAI.
He
He's still an
could.
independent.
He could. They probably
He
pay him
could,
millions.
absolutely.
They
No,
pay
he
him
doesn't
millions.
want to. His
Really?
lab is all women. Okay, first
Wow.
of all, he really likes the idea of helping people down in the trenches. And he's
Right.
at Simon Fraser University up in Vancouver, and he
Right.
loves it. So, lifestyle matters,
Well, but Mark, I have to ask you because you made a ton of money when
Yeah.
Macro Mind became Macro
It
Media, and then
wasn't necessarily a ton. It was
it was a ton. It
because
was a ton,
well, they
Mark.
gave
It was
us a
a ton.
lot. They gave us a really low valuation, and so by the time the merged companies, because remember they brought in this company called Paracomp, then they bought a 50% dilution and brought in Authorware. So by the time we went public, Devore and I together had
Yeah.
3%.
No, no, that can't be right. That
Yeah.
can't be right, Mark. That's a big lesson because to entrepreneurs, the lesson that you're pointing to is you have to be conscious when you're 51%, 55%, 60%
Goes below 50.
goes below 50 because you lose control of the company that you created because of
So,
money.
Jack, I got a lot
money
of lessons.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot of lessons. I also ran into this with Naval Ravikant
Right.
and a
Right.
company we called Cola. I also learned that lesson. So I've learned lots of lessons. It's just the trick is to be in the right place at the right time. In the restaurant business.
No. That's important. But Mark, you have a certain set of creative juices
Right.
that produce. They do produce. And if I were Gates and I were a CEO of Microsoft, instead of just offering you a publishing deal, I would have said, Mark, you got to be head of our creative talent group. You have to be ahead of people that we want because we're going up against Apple. Apple's got a lot of the creatives because the Mac interface has basically wedded them to that device. And so far,
so Jack, I'll tell you one. I'll tell you one
thing.
inside. So I'll tell you one inside track.
Okay.
My nephew is the number 3 at Cloudflare.
Okay, Cloudflare is big.
I've got some ideas for him. I'm pitching him. Plus, he happens to be an investor in Instigate.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Is Instigate still alive?
Yes. And I'm working on the resuscitation of it right now. It also was ahead of the curve.
Right.
About 9 or 10 years too soon. I've had it on hiatus since 2022.
But Mark, you've observed that you're always 15 to 20 years ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And you must know that means you have to actually keep notebooks of all these ideas because you were ahead of the curve for sure.
So Jack, who told me to keep all my notes in the notebooks?
I did. I remember that conversation.
You want to see how many journals I have?
You must have 50 to 100 notebooks at this point.
Well, it's about 50. You're right.
Yeah, you must.
About 50 journals.
You must. But people don't realize that when you're an inventor and you're a creator and ideas are coming to you, whether they are on a whiteboard, they're on a napkin, they're on a fence, because you often visualize stuff on a white painted fence. And I know you did that in the East Bay. And you look out, sometimes you take a wall over, you put some Post-it stickers up.
I've got the posters up right now in my apartment here.
Right. So conceptually, you're in the creative mode. And of course, reading a book like Rick Rubin's book about creativity, it's just scratching the surface of something that you become a master at. I'm convinced that you are a master at it, but I don't think you've ever engaged in actually teaching the mastery. I know you've engaged in teaching the mastery of graphical user interface and how to make the user feel comfortable. I know that. I've seen you do it. I've seen you do it in focus groups. I've seen you do it with simulations. I've seen you do it a million different ways. But conceptually, there is a broader category of creativity. The De Bono type lateral thinking creativity, the Rick Rubin type creativity. I think you're in that league. And I think Meta, for example, should pay you like a $10 million startup bonus to say, come here and help us, because now they're coming out with a set of, they're going to come out with a set of glasses. They're doing it in an interesting way. I'm convinced.
Exactly. I mean, if I had an agent to represent me and help me, first you'd have to give me in advance.
I got to call up Marc. Meet Marc Canter. Meet Marc.
And I pitched Peter Weiner. I pitched this. I pitched that. I mean, I'm willing to pitch people.
Marc, you are a treasure. But you are a treasure to the American economy, much bigger than even Donald Trump. But you're not being recognized. It's Doug Engelbart. Doug Engelbart. People say to me, who the hell was Doug Engelbart? Doug Engelbart.
Dude, I have photos. For our next podcast, I will bring you photos of Doug Engelbart with my daughter, Mimi.
Nice. But Doug was a treasure as well, not recognized by Jobs, not recognized by Wozniak. It's a damn shame. Not even recognized by Xerox, which is really a shame.
Nobody recognized them.
Xerox totally fumbled what should have been a major innovation from the copy machine over to the Xerox Altos. That should have happened. It didn't happen. I mean, Xerox is such a sad story in the American economy when they had brilliant people at Xerox PARC, like Doug Engelbart, like people like you in many ways. And somehow there are people like Steve Jobs, rest his soul, that can somehow commercialize stuff that they don't really invent. They don't really invent. Now, if he was alive,
not Elon Musk. He doesn't invent it.
He just
takes credit for it.
He would smack me too. Bald Autumn would smack me and say, stop it. And I'd say, come on, guys, let's tell the truth. Graphical user interface was invented by Xerox. It was not invented by Apple. Yeah. You guys package it. You package it well. Bravo. The mouse was not invented by you. It was invented by Xerox, by Doug Engelbart. You package it well. You package it well. We give you credit for it. There are other people that package it better, frankly, but that's a footnote. And then go on to say, additionally, the iPod was invented by my next door neighbor, Tony Fidel. And even before Tony Fidel, there were other people that were invented portable podcast players. And, podcasts took off like a rocket once those players became cheap enough. And Jobs packaged that, and what came out of the iPod was the iPhone. He didn't invent that either.
But the secret was the fact that Jobs only offered one contract. It was $1 a song. You either took it or leave it. Spotify, by the way, did the same thing with their contracts with the music labels, and they had to give up a serious equity stake to all the major labels. So they were them. I mean, they were negotiating with themselves, And so it's the history of, it shows that it's not always just the hardware. It's the lawyers who come in, who cut the deals. Remember, you've got to have the legal rights.
You got to be smart. You got to be smart about looking at how big your innovation is, because I'll tell you, that innovation at Xerox was mega. And yet they didn't recognize it. And part of the reason was they liked their copy machines, just like IBM liked
their. They didn't want to cannibalize them.
They didn't want to cannibalize. So let's do this again. You can pick the time and date. I'll get you all the translated text from it, because I know you're writing your memoirs, and your memoirs are going to turn into a great film someday. I'm going to help you with that.
But it's going to be a TV show, not a film. It'll be a series. Netflix, and you know who I want to play me, right?
Yeah, who?
Seth Rogen.
Oh, he'd be perfect. He might be getting a little too old now.
We'll use the AI technology to make him look younger.
Okay, because you that's good. That'd be good. Marc, it's been a pleasure, but we'll do it again. We'll talk again. Thank you for being so positive and on with this. That's really cool. Talk to you later.
Dude. Talk to you later.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.